This is not breaking news. This is not a scandal. This is not about one person. This is about a system quietly changing its shape while most of us are still using the old map. For decades, you were told the ground beneath the global economy was solid, predictable, self-correcting. You were told that if something truly dangerous happened, alarms would sound. They didn't. What just shifted did not arrive with sirens. It arrived with balance sheets, with routine transactions, with decisions that look technical. Here is the destabilizing truth. When the plumbing of a system changes, everything above it eventually moves. Jobs, prices, power, stability. I am not asking you to panic. I am asking you to stay with me. Once you see how this mechanism actually works, you cannot unsee where it leads. If this matters to you, don't look away. Stay here. The next piece explains who really holds the controls now and why that should unsettle you. For a long time, we were taught to look for power in the wrong place. We look at elections. We look at speeches. We look at leaders. But the system does not move because of who speaks the loudest. It moves because of who must be paid. Right now, what truly controls the system is not ideology or diplomacy. It is demand for debt. Quiet, relentless, mathematical. The modern global economy runs on promises. Promises written as bonds. Promises that only matter if someone keeps buying them. For decades, that demand felt automatic, almost natural, as if it could never weaken. But here is the unsettling shift. Control no longer sits with the issuer of the promise. It sits with the buyer who can choose to step back. And when enough buyers hesitate even calmly, the entire structure begins to feel weight instead of momentum. This is where the story stops being abstract. Because once control shifts away from confidence, it does not announce itself. It reveals itself slowly. And the slow reveal is always the most dangerous part. There was a time when this system moved almost invisibly. Before, excess flowed outward and came back quietly. Before, imbalance felt manageable. Before, the cost of delay was hidden. Now, the shift is slow enough to be mistaken for normal. That is the danger. What changed was not a rule, it was a habit. For years, a single pattern repeated itself so reliably that it stopped being questioned. Surpluses accumulated. Savings had to go somewhere. The same place every time. That repetition created the illusion of permanence. But permanence in economics is usually just a long pause before motion. What you are watching now is not a sudden break. It is the normalization of exit. Small adjustments, gradual reductions, decisions spread over years instead of days. That is why most people miss it. Nothing happens all at once. And yet, once a system teaches its largest participants how to leave quietly, the meaning of stability changes completely. Because when exit becomes routine, loyalty becomes optional. And that realization leads directly to the first visible shock. Then the quiet shift produced a noise you could not fully ignore. Not a crash, not a panic, a release. A large holder began reducing exposure. Not dramatically, not all at once, just consistently. Balance sheets told the story before headlines did. Hundreds of billions moved, not into risk, into distance. This was not a protest. It was not an announcement. It was a calculation. A recognition that safety was no longer neutral. And here is the destabilizing part. The system absorbed it. No alarms, no emergency meetings, markets adjusted, life went on. That response is what should unsettle you. Because when something this large happens without visible disruption, it signals that the mechanism has already changed. The shock was survivable because the damage was deferred. The real effect doesn't appear where the sale happens. It appears where the replacement must come from. And once you ask who fills that gap, you start to see the pressure point. That is where the story tightens. Here is where the system reveals how it actually works. When large buyers step back, the need does not disappear. The borrowing continues. The obligations remain. Someone must absorb the gap. And when the market hesitates, the system turns inward. This is the hidden mechanism. Demand does not have to vanish to become dangerous. It only has to change hands. When public debt loses enough external buyers, the burden shifts to an internal solution, a technical one, a quiet one, the kind that doesn't feel like a decision. Money is created to maintain motion. Debt is purchased to preserve stability. On paper, nothing breaks. But the cost is transferred. Those closest to assets feel insulation. Those living on wages feel compression. Purchasing power thins. Prices climb. Time becomes more expensive. No one announces this as a trade-off. It arrives as a condition. And the more often this mechanism is used, the harder it becomes to reverse. Because once a system relies on internal support to survive, removing it feels like collapse. That dependency is not visible yet, but it is accelerating toward its next stress point. Then the pressure speeds up. Rates rise. Costs follow. The math tightens. What once felt manageable starts to feel urgent. Interest compounds faster than growth. Refinancing replaces repayment. Every new obligation exists to service the last one. There is no pause, only rollover. And here's the destabilizing part. The system cannot slow down without hurting itself. Expansion becomes the only way to avoid contraction. So decisions shorten, time horizons shrink, risk tolerance changes. You begin to see it in prices first, then in budgets, then in behavior. Nothing collapses, it strains. Because collapse is loud, strain is quiet. Strain convinces people to adjust instead of resist, but strain accumulates. And once a system reaches the point where stopping hurts more than continuing, every shock, no matter how small, starts to matter. The next one is not abstract. It lands where people live. This is where it stops being theoretical. This is where it reaches you. You feel it when the same paycheck stretches less, when savings stop feeling like protection, when necessities rise faster than explanations. You are told this is temporary, that it will stabilize, that adjustment is normal. But adjustment has a direction. What you are absorbing is not a single shock. It is the accumulated cost of maintaining a system that can no longer externalize its risk the way it used to. You did not vote for this. You did not negotiate it. And yet, you are asked to carry it quietly. This is why attention matters. Not outrage, attention. Because when systems rely on public endurance instead of public consent, they continue only as long as people accept the squeeze as unavoidable. If this feels personal, it is. Stay with me. Understanding where this pressure comes from is the only way to see where it may go next. And the next movement does not stop at borders. Once pressure stops being local, it stops being containable. What began as an internal adjustment spreads outward through trade, finance, and alignment. Quietly at first. Then structurally, partners hedge, settlements change, reserves shift form, not because of ideology, but because exposure has become a risk. This is how fragmentation starts. Not with confrontation, with redundancy. Parallel systems appear, alternate routes. New agreements designed to avoid single points of control, each one small, each one defensible on its own. Together, they redraw the map. And here is the destabilizing truth. A system built on central gravity weakens faster than one built on dispersion. Once participants learn they have options, confidence stops being automatic. It becomes conditional. That condition spreads faster than policy can respond, faster than narratives can adjust. And when enough actors begin planning for a world that no longer behaves as one system, coordination becomes friction. What follows is not isolation. It is uncertainty. And uncertainty accelerates every existing weakness. From here, the future stops being singular. It branch. One path is adjustment. The system absorbs the signal. Influence narrows. Expectations reset. The structure remains, but smaller, slower, less forgiving. Stability survives by conceding dominance. Another path is erosion. Pressure continues, confidence thins. Internal support becomes routine. Each cycle feels survivable until the accumulation becomes visible. Not a crash, a decline that is felt before it is named. The third path is rupture. Not because someone chooses it, but because timing fails. A shock meets a system already stretched, liquidity tightens, trust pauses, correction arrives faster than coordination. None of these paths announce themselves in advance. And here's the unsettling part. The difference between them is not policy alone. It is reaction speed. It is whether systems adapt before strain becomes habit. You do not get to choose which path unfolds. You only get to recognize which one you are already on. And that recognition always comes later than comfort. This is where I stop giving you closure. Because systems like this do not end cleanly. They thin, they fragment. They ask people to adjust until adjustment becomes identity. What changed was not a single decision. It was the assumption that the center would always hold. Once that assumption breaks, everything built on it becomes provisional. You will hear reassurances. You will hear confidence. You will hear that this has all happened before and worked out fine. What you will not hear is certainty. So the question is not whether the system survives, it is who absorbs the cost of its survival. If you are still watching, it is because you sense that something fundamental has shifted, even if no one used dramatic language to describe it. Do not stop here. The next conversation is not about collapse, it is about adaptation, leverage, and what happens when power no longer sits where we expect it to. Stay curious, stay alert. This story is not finished.